So what if I told you that the key to understanding our modern economy, from Wall Street all the way down to your own wallet, wasn't in some dusty textbook, but in a 3,000-year-old religious law? Sounds crazy, right? But today, we're going to explore this really surprising link between one of the most powerful financial minds alive and an ancient, super radical idea for hitting the reset button on society.
All right, let's dive right into the central mystery here. How could the world's largest hedge fund, a symbol of pure data-driven capitalism, possibly share a core principle with a law from the book of Leviticus? It's a weird question for sure, but the answer? Well, it reveals this powerful pattern that's been shaping human history for thousands of years.
So you've got these two worlds, right? On one hand, the world of high finance, super complex, all about data, big money. And on the other, ancient scriptures. They couldn't seem more different. But, and this is the key, they're connected by this one really powerful cycle that just keeps repeating itself.
Okay, so to really get this, let's start with the modern side of things. We need to look at the philosophy of the guy who built this whole financial empire.
Meet Ray Dalio. He's the founder of the world's biggest hedge fund. And in case you're wondering, a hedge fund basically manages huge amounts of money for super wealthy clients. Now, his whole philosophy is pretty simple, but profound. If you want to understand where we're going, you have to understand where we've been. He looks for these repeating patterns in history. He calls them archetypes. And honestly, that's the secret sauce to his success.
And look, this isn't just some abstract idea he talks about. It's the actual foundation for his famous all-weather portfolio. It's designed to be resilient in any economic season. Boom, bust, inflation, you name it. The whole strategy isn't about trying to predict the future. It's about being ready for the cycles of history to do what they always do.
So, what's the biggest, most important cycle he found in all his research? It all comes down to one thing: debt.
This chart pretty much sums up his biggest idea, the long-term debt cycle. What he found is that over and over again for about 50 to 75 years, societies just pile on more and more debt. And for a while it feels great. It creates this huge boom, everyone feels rich. But eventually, that debt load gets too heavy, and the whole thing comes crashing down, a really painful bust.
And Dalio says there are these really clear warning signs that a cycle is about to end. Yeah, you've got massive debt, obviously, but you also see these huge gaps between the rich and poor, and even big divides in what people believe, which leads to all the political fighting we see. Then, the central banks start printing tons of money to try and keep things afloat, and all that instability, it just fuels conflict both inside the country and with other countries. Does any of that sound familiar?
And here it is. This is where it all connects. Dalio himself writes that this isn't new. This whole cycle of piling on debt and then having to reset, it's been happening for literally thousands of years. And the number one historical example he uses to prove his point, you guessed it, the year of Jubilee, right from the Old Testament.
Okay, so Dalio, the hedge fund billionaire, points us to this ancient law. So what in the world was the year of Jubilee?
So the year of Jubilee, from the book of Leviticus, was basically this radical society-wide reset button. It was meant to happen every 50 years, and its whole purpose was to stop the exact kind of collapse that Dalio's debt cycles say is inevitable.
And it was built on three pretty revolutionary ideas. First, poof, all debts are just gone, canceled. Second, anyone who had basically become an indentured servant because of their debts, they were set free. And third, and this one is a real game changer, all the land went back to its original family owners. It was designed to be a hard stop against inequality getting completely out of control.
But you see, this wasn't just some economic plan. It was deeply spiritual. The core idea was that people don't really own the land. God does. We're all just stewards, taking care of it for a while. And that single belief was the key to preventing a few powerful families from gobbling everything up forever. It made sure every family had a real shot. And get this, it's pretty amazing. The system even had an environmental piece. Every 7th year, the land got its own Sabbath. You just had to let the fields rest, let them recover. We're talking about long-term sustainability baked right into the economy thousands of years ago.
So, as you can imagine, this idea of a total societal reset is incredibly powerful. And it didn't just stay in ancient history. It has echoed down through the centuries, inspiring all kinds of movements for justice.
You can see the spirit of Jubilee pop up all over history. In 1865, when enslaved people in Texas were finally freed, they celebrated Juneteenth, singing about bringing the Jubilee. Fast forward to the 1990s, and you have the Jubilee Debt Campaign, which was all about canceling the crushing debts of the world's poorest countries. And even today, groups like the Poor People's Campaign call their entire set of goals a Jubilee platform.
And these movements aren't just symbolic. There's a real reason for them. Check out this stat from the Jubilee Debt Campaign. They found that for every single dollar in aid that goes to Africa, more than $6 get pulled right back out. How? Through things like debt payments and big corporations avoiding taxes. It shows that the system is often set up to extract wealth, not to help.
And today, you can hear that same language of Jubilee being used to talk about some of our biggest modern problems. You hear it in the calls to cancel student debt. You hear it in the really important conversation about reparations for slavery. And you hear it when people talk about making sure the shift to a green economy is fair and doesn't leave the most vulnerable people behind.
So let's bring it all back to today. When we put on both of these glasses, Dalio's debt cycle glasses and the ancient Jubilee glasses, what do we see? Where are we right now?
Well, the data is not great. It's actually pretty sobering. The World Bank says that in 2020, global inequality went up for the first time in decades. And by 2022, things like the pandemic had pushed another 23 million people into extreme poverty. The gap between the rich and poor is getting wider. And that is a classic textbook sign that you're in the late stage of a debt cycle. It's something both Ray Dalio and the ancient writers of Leviticus would spot in a heartbeat.
So it really feels like we're at a crossroads, with two paths ahead of us, two very different kinds of resets. Path number one is the one Dalio warns about. It's the messy, chaotic, painful collapse that happens when a system just can't hold its own weight anymore. It's a reset that happens to you, not by you, and it's awful.
But then there's path number two, the alternative. This is the path inspired by the spirit of Jubilee. It's a managed, intentional reset, a proactive choice to fix things, to restore balance, to forgive debts that can never be repaid, and to redesign the system so that everyone has a real chance to succeed.
And that really is the question we're all facing. Because history tells us that some kind of reset is probably coming. The cycles just keep turning. The only real question is, what kind of reset will it be? Are we going to just wait for a chaotic collapse? Or are we going to find the courage to actually design a better, fairer, and more sustainable future on purpose?